o'clock, I'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, at 6 p.m. on Thursday, March 20th, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. And I'd like to request everyone silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices as to not to be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your indulgence. We'll move on to roll call and ask all the supervisors to please sign in. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, and thank you for your interest in county government. And we will move on to item number 7, and that is public comment. We do have one individual, and I would invite that individual to the front of the room and direct your comments to the chair. You will be granted 3 minutes under our rules for public comment.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'm Tim White. I am the director of Visit Wausau, also known as the Wausau Central Wisconsin Convention and Visitors Bureau, our old-timey name. Thank you, county board members, for allowing us to talk a little bit about some of the items on the agenda. The main one that we really want to talk about as the CVB and the Badger State Games is the Marathon Park Ice Arena economic impact, the temporary ice rink fix, not a new ice rink, but a temporary fix. And full disclosure, I'm the party that I represent too is the Green Party, and so that's the economic impact that the ice arena makes. We were doing some data sets on everything from the Cyclones hockey to the Badger State Games, figure skating events, Badger State Games youth hockey, local high school hockey, local youth hockey, and the open skate pass holders. And from a very, very conservative estimate of the impact of the rinks, we have seen at least 10,600 plus attendees from the September to March season on average, with 5,700 visitors of that number. From an economic spending, economic benefit, we've seen visitor spending at $1.4 million. And again, this is very conservative for us. We could go and take a little bit more time and research, but just our basic initial research shows that it's derived from overnight accommodations, dining, shopping, and local entertainment, averaging to about $150 per visitor spend. Then there's local spending as well, which is $250,000, because a lot of times families will go out to eat, and of course they'll buy gear as well. So investment in the temporary fix as a investment for the short term will allow us to, we are moving the Badger State Games from Mosinee to Wausau. If that's not fixed, we cannot do that. That figure skating event, it's the largest event that we have, as well as the youth hockey event. So I highly recommend supporting that fix for the ice hockey. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now then move on to the balance of the agenda. Item 8, educational presentations and/or reports. And the first is any reports by standing committee chairs or designees. Any standing committee chairs or designees? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 8B, a presentation on planning and funding plan for a potential relocation of Wausau Highway Department facility, and that's going to be kicked off by Supervisor Fifrick as the chair of the Infrastructure Committee, along with Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Since joining the board in 2016, the future of the Main County Highway Shop in Wausau. Thank you. We're not supposed to.
One of the things that, with the new mics, if you please don't move the mics, they're not designed to be moved, so just leave them in place, turn them on, and when you're done speaking, make sure that you turn them off. They are very sensitive. They do pick up speech very well, so just a side note for everyone. So, thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. Since joining the board in 2016, the future of the Main County Highway Shop in Wausau has been an ongoing topic of discussion. As Supervisor Robinson can certainly attest, a great deal of work and planning was done even before I joined the board. And much more has been done since. However, the uncertainty of the surrounding facility's future has placed our staff in a difficult position, particularly when it comes to maintenance decisions and financial investment. Year after year, we've patched things up, applied temporary fixes to a facility that may not be part of our long-term goals. Just in the last 6 months, infrastructure has had multiple meetings talking about the future of the facility. Back in September, staff provided an update on the new highway department facility plans. In December of last year, we met jointly with Finance Committee for an update and discussion regarding the purchase of property and possible future county highway building facility sites. This past February, members of the Infrastructure and Finance Committee took a visit to Eau Claire County to look at their new facility that they recently opened. The time has come for the county board to make a definitive decision about the future of this vital facility. We owe it to our staff, our community, and our future operations to provide clarity and direction moving forward. I look forward to discussing the details of the proposal and working together to chart the course of the future county highway shop. I'll turn it over to Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you. The issue of a new highway facility has been around for years. The 2008 West Side Master Plan for the Marathon Park in that area called for the relocation of the highway garage. I had the opportunity to serve as chair of the Infrastructure Committee several years ago, and we were talking about site selection, locations and processes and other things, and little progress has been made in the last 5 years. Supervisor Fifrick has done a good job of outlining more recent discussions, but we're really looking at a department that is striving for efficiency, and as a part of that efficiency, it means bigger vehicles. The problem with the current facility is that there's limited space, and the building is small, which means that every night they have to take the plows off and at night to get them in the garage and then put them back on in the morning. That poses both a safety and cost factor. The tight quarters make it difficult to move things around. We currently have a highway fund balance, a very healthy fund balance, and the thought is that between $26 and $30 million of that fund balance, which is unassigned, could be applied to the new facility. We're waiting for the final numbers from the 2024 audit, which we hope to have within the next week, but we did discuss that during the most recent budget discussions. The issue before the board is, do we support moving ahead with a new facility? The Infrastructure Committee would work on the design and the locations, and the Finance Committee, Human Resources Finance Property Committee would work on how are we going to pay for it. County Administration will now provide you with an overview of the history of the project and the options available to us.
All right, I'm going to have Jim answer all the hard questions, but thank you very much, Supervisor Robinson and Supervisor Pfeifferich. So we are going to show you a PowerPoint today, and I want to start with answering a question you might ask, which is, where can I get a copy of this PowerPoint? We are going to email it to you. It wasn't in the packet. You're not being asked for any action today or next week. This is as Supervisor Pfeiffer and Supervisor Robinson kind of alluded to, we're really hoping to distill down in less than 2 hours. I'm kidding, it's gonna be a lot less than that, but relatively quickly, more than 18 years of discussion that's happened at the board. Now, a lot of that predates me and my role, but not Jim. So we'll be able to walk through a lot of that and hopefully answer some questions, but I want to be very clear at the outset. These are the three things we're going to go over. What's been done, what's being done, and kind of at a high level where we think the next steps are, but not asking, we're certainly never going to, I'm not going to stand up here and say, I recommend you do X as it relates to the highway shop. My job and staff's job is to bring you information to help you make an informed decision, as was alluded to, because it's a complex issue. And we recognize this, there's going to be a lot you hear today. We're going to email you this presentation. I also talked with Kim. We're going to put it in the packet for Tuesday so you have it to go back to in the future. And we will certainly bring you more information, which will be the next step slides. But at a high level, we're really trying to get more than 18 years of what the board has been talking about with the Wausau shop in front of you, because there are on the horizon, relatively near horizon, some significant potential decisions for you. Well, there's decisions for you to weigh. Jim, I think you're starting with studies.
I'll start out with studies. So we've done a lot of studies. We've actually completed 6 different studies since this project's been going off. I've been working on this project myself for about 10 years. A lot of direction from different committees on what we should do, what we couldn't do. So our first study back in 2015 was just a space needs study. So what do we need? So we sat down with our group at the Highway Department and discussed it with architectural firm that we've been using. And we came up with we need a facility overall about 240,000 square feet. So that was our first study. About a year later, the consolidation of buildings conversation started with everybody. So at that point, we talked about adding other departments to our facility. We talked about adding the sheriffs, just the maintenance end of it, where they work on their vehicles, Parks, Forestry, and Rec, CPZ, the medical examiner's office, and emergency management. So we did another study, because we like studies. That study came back and said we needed a facility of 340,000 square feet to house that entire group. Well over 40 acres we needed for a site. So at that point, we started looking at different sites. We had many different studies looking at different sites. We actually looked over 20 different sites. We evaluated those different sites. And back in 2020, for those of you on the board back then, we actually had a proposal in front of this committee to offer to purchase. Eventually, that did not pass the board, and also was in the Village of Maine, and they were unwilling at that point to change the zoning anyhow. So the project ended up getting shelved for a few years. We started the studies back up in 2022. By that point, the North Central Healthcare Center had already encumbered a few of the departments that we talked, so we started downsizing, and eventually we ended up going back to where we started back in 15. What do we need just for the highway department? So we went back to that 240,000 square feet facility that's heated and non-heated altogether. We came up with a few different sites. Again, nothing really had happened since that. We did have a conversation with a few different municipalities about zoning, and that seems to be a hard thing right now, was a zoning issue, but eventually we believe we might have found something. Again, as mentioned, we did take a little field trip. Supervisor Lemmer, Supervisor Robinson, Jensen, and Mr. Dickinson, along with Administrator Lance, Deputy Administrator Chris, and Facility Craig came with us from facilities, along with a couple people from our shop. And we went over and looked at Eau Claire's facility. Eau Claire's facility was just built in 2023, And Lance says he never asked you for anything, but if we could just pick that up and move it over here, I'd be really happy. It's a beautiful facility. It's well laid out, well thought out. So that's we have done those. That kind of gives you a history of what we've done so far.
And just to build on what Jim said, so it was actually 2019, because it was when I was the deputy administrator. The county board in December of that year we had done all those site selections that Jim referenced, and we had a site, and the board was weighing an offer to purchase, and the recommendation from staff was turn it down because of the zoning issue. Finding a place, Jim seems like a nice guy and his staff are nice, but apparently they're tough to live next to. So that has been a bit of a challenge, and I think Jim's understating. There's a lot of work that went into trying to find a site that is not only suitable, as Jim will talk about, based on the work of the highway department. You can't put our highway department just on any 40-acre parcel in the county. It's got to be in a spot. I mean, classic real estate is one. Location, location, location. That's really important for the work that they do. But it has been a challenge to find a place to look. As it relates to the consolidation study, for those of you that remember the Heinz ketchup commercial, the best things come to those who wait. I think this is one of those situations. We have done a lot, and in fact, we have a number of departments this month that are moving from the courthouse and other facilities into our Lakeview campus. We have accomplished all of the goals of that facility consolidation work back in 2015. We just did it differently. A lot of the efficiencies that were driving the direction from the board back then about get people under fewer roofs, fewer parking lots, more shared parking lots, better collaboration, through the board direction from that time and the board's action in approving facility projects recently, you have consolidated your footprint. You've just done it differently. So the task moving forward, which we'll talk about a little bit, the idea of consolidation is still important. As your administrator, I'm telling you, I think it's still a really important thing to keep in our minds. We just look at consolidation differently. Instead of looking at consolidating highway with other departments on a site, look at the constellation of highway shops, because we have multiple highway shops. Where can we locate the Wausau shop or relocate the Wausau shop to a place that makes sense to potentially downsize over time, I think is the thing to keep in mind relative to consolidation. It's still important. And then, as was referenced, the West Side Master Plan, which started in 2007 and was finalized throughout 2008. The board for, like I said, 18 years has been saying long-term, the West Street site is not the best site for a highway shop. So Jim will talk through some of the current situations we have with our site. This is our current site on West Street, and we're going to go through and highlight 3 of the big challenges, and we're going to start with location, then move on to site layout and size and condition. So take it away, Jim.
So we are nestled on a beautiful 7.88 acres at the corner of 17th and West. That does not include the land that's right next to us that we share with Jamie in the Parks Department. We have some extra land where the cold storage was. We always thought we had 8-point-some acres, and we realized some of it's north of the railroad tracks in Marathon Park. So the original parcel of land is 7.88 acres. Directly to the south of us is Quick Trip. Great place for glazers, coffees, and lunch for us. Not a really good place for generating traffic. I went over to Quick Trip the other day and I asked them what they have for traffic, how many visits they have a day. They say they have 2,000 guests a day at that particular Quick Trip. The majority of that traffic, well, their signage says no left turns out of it, so it all comes out of West Street. So I would guess, I ain't got the exact numbers, but at least 75 or 80% of it is coming out of West Street and coming up 17th at this intersection, coming up and making that turn. So that causes us a lot of issues. Across from us is First Choice School Bus. So we deal with school buses in the morning and the evening. To the north of us, a few blocks, is John Muir Middle School. So we have a lot of kids walking that sidewalk, using the sidewalk south of us. To the east of us is a trucking business that houses a couple different places out of there at Marathon Mail, and a couple other businesses are out of that. So we're in a very tight area. So I took a picture of us trying to get out of the parking lot. This is what our trucks deal with because that's our main entrance is coming out to 17th Street. You notice there's a biker here. More than once, especially this past year, there's somebody with an e-bike out in that area that screams down that thing from the north to the south. And when you're pulling out, someday something's going to happen there with that intersection. We have people walking a lot of times on that street, walking up to the park, especially when the weather starts getting nicer here. We see a lot of walkers. Again, the intersection that's right there, people are coming out of that intersection and they're always in a hurry like everybody else. This particular truck, when I was out there having to take this picture, he came up to that intersection, there was no cars coming, and he never stopped. He came up, did a rolling, and took a right. So we've had an accident there a few years back. We're going to have more accidents at that intersection, pulling out of there. You got to remember, in the winter, these guys have their plows on, so they're sitting back behind that fence with their plow, the nose of the truck, out in that sidewalk so they can see around that corner. So we deal with a lot of stuff at that intersection. I went out there and actually took a video, and this was not during rush hour, but this show what it takes for a... didn't have a plow on. School bus comes along driving through with a view. And this is a truck. When we start bringing a low boy out of there, the condition gets a lot worse. I believe this video in total is like 38 seconds somewhere in there for that one truck to get out of that parking lot. And I was kind of disappointed at the time I said there was no cars coming out of the picture. It still took him that long to pull out of that intersection. Our flow in our yard is another issue. We don't have great flow in our yard. For example, this building number 6 here, that hoses we have two different people on our sign department. The people that work out of here, one of the guys that work out here, his truck is stationed way over here, the last door of number 8. So every day, that's his walk he does. Number 9 hosts our bridge crew people. So the supervisor starts over in building 2, walks to 9, then they have to drive back and get parts. Building number 9, by the way, for those who remember the old Bookmobile, that was the Bookmobile garage. So we took over the Bookmobile garage. A lot of these buildings that we have were brought in from other sites. For example, building number 12, that used to be, probably nobody in this room remembers, we had a shop in Elderon. At one point, we moved that shop from Elderon to here. We're the X's in building number 5. The salt comes out of our salt shed up in the corner, so he needs to come around, gets on the scale, and goes in there to load. So the flow is not very good. Vision in their yard is not the greatest. There's been accidents in their yard, and I can test because back in about 94, I was involved in one of them. Right around here, coming around the corner, people really can't see. And I am concerned about the safety, because when we went to Eau Claire, I'll show you that later on, I have a slide, but the general public and the employee parking is different, a different location. Here, we're all mixed together. Our employee parking is around our buildings. Our vendor come up in here to our stock room. Our shop is over here. When we have people coming in for picking up permits or asking questions, picking up adopt a highway stuff, they're driving through the same area. So we're all combined in the same area. So between the flow and the safety of the area gives me some concerns. Another thing that we were concerned about is the size and the layout of our equipment out there. This is one of our places that we host the trucks, and I'll get back to this water a little bit later on. But we park the vehicles all inside where they have to, take, like I mentioned earlier, we take the plows off when we go out plowing. We have to hook up the plows. Last night was a great example. We stayed out pretty late last night. Plows came in about 8:30, 9 o'clock. They all had to unhook their plows. This morning, they came back in at 3 o'clock. They had to hook their plows back up. The question was brought to me, well, what does that really cost? And I asked our guys, and our guys are pretty efficient at it. So I want even on the light side. I said, if it takes us 15 minutes a day, and that's 7.5 minutes hooking up, 7.5 minutes unhooking, and that's if they come in here perfect and nothing's hooked up, that's 15 minutes a day. It took the average rate of our plow drivers, and remember, like last night, it snowed once, but we had to unhook and hook, so it's two, so you got to do it 2 times. We have over $140,000 every year just unhooking and hooking our plows up. A little over $2,600 a storm we've spent just hooking and unhooking our plows. When those guys are out there hooking and unhooking the plows, they're not getting very good inspections on those plows. We brought in a plow this past year with a crack in the plow. And the time we got in the shop, we looked, there were so many cracks in it. We put a lot of money just because the plows are covered with snow, the hoses are covered with snow. So we have a lot of issues with coming in and out. Again, we're not buying the right size trucks. We rather stay out on the road, and we have a lot of these single axle trucks right now because it's all we can fit in the building. So when they're out halfway plowing, turn around, come back and reload. So, we're not being very efficient. We're parking vehicles outside in the snow. These are a couple quad trucks we got sitting outside in the snow. A quad truck not set up with anything on. We just took delivery on one 2 days ago. A quad truck is about $240,000 right now, and we're letting them sit outside. I mean, I think everybody in this room loves to get piece of equipment that you have or your cars inside to make them last longer. When you're starting to pay $240,000 for a plow truck, we have some concerns. I pointed out that water pitcher. We had the water in the shop, and so we finally got our plumber in to fix it. And we dug it up, and what happened, those pipes are getting so old, they're just decaying and rusted through. So that's how come that water wasn't running. That elbow, when we dug it up, was rusted right off. We had 2 locations in the shop we had to do that to. The original shop where this was dug out, this shop was built in the mid-1930s, about 1935 as I could find records from. So that's the shop we're still using today. There's no CO sensors for exhaust fans. The buildings are not very efficient. Building maintenance came through and they looked at everything. We know we're not efficient with insurance. There's no LED lighting. The mechanics have a hard time seeing stuff. The office area is over 25 years old. The furnishing, not talking about the office itself, which records I can find was built in about the 1960s. The heating, ventilator, air conditioning in the office part is a residential. It's at the near of its life. I mean, very often I'll be in my office and it'll go from 75 degrees and the next morning I'll come in and it's 50 degrees and it's 70 degrees out by the ladies in the front. We can't get a control of those units. So that's kind of what we're dealing. The tiles are starting to come off the floors. It's a lot of different things going on. Outside some of the buildings, we actually store our sand salt in a metal building. For those of you that don't know, metal and salt don't go real good together. So we have that issue. We have no doors on this building, which we just been inspected every year. WISDOT comes through and inspects all the buildings, and this is the first year they comment that we need to get some type of doors on these buildings, so we need to do that. A few more pictures I take, and this is the back side of our salt shed. Most of the beams in our salt shed all are cracked like this in the back. So we're going to have to do something with that. And this is inside of our cold storage. This is the frame that goes around the door. It's just rusted all the way through on the door frame. So we got a lot of different issues. Again, facilities went through, and Craig and this team kind of put some ballpark numbers together to fix it. Even if we do fix it and we bring all the things I just showed you, the drainage and, fixing the metal on the buildings and insulated, new furniture, after that's all said and done, we're still in a building that's got bad flow, doesn't give us a better location, and it doesn't make it any safer. So everything we discussed earlier, we can throw as much money at we want at this. It doesn't fix the main issues of where we're at and what we're doing. As I mentioned, we took a tour of Eau Claire. Here is our site on the left. This building right here is no longer there. This is a parcel we share with Jamie and her crew, just for storage. We only have about half of this. The southern half of this had to be reserved for green space. So we have the northern half of that we have a lot of trailers and stuff parked out there. But you can see we're in here pretty tight. This is the medical examiner's office right here, which will be available at some point. Again, we still have that same flow that I talked about, tight turning radiuses. You can see how tight this is around here. Now you look at Eau Claire's. All the employee and visitor parking and vendors, they all come to the area up in front. They don't get tangled up at all with the trucks at night coming in. They have a separate loading dock that's monitored. They can take deliveries there 24/7, all monitored, keyed, and the shop is over here. And then when the trucks come in at night, they come in, they have their fuel station, and they can go salt and park in the main storage right here. So the vehicles and the general public, they never touch one another as far as traveling. You notice also, Eau Claire, they got big, the lighting on top, green lighting in here, so that's their cold storage. Another advantage that they have, and that's what I'm looking for in our sites, is ingress and egress. All their flow is mainly right in and right out, so that's one of the things I'm looking at for whatever site we find, is I don't want to make turns like I showed earlier against traffic. Like right now, we come out, we're taking that left against that northbound traffic. Trying to find a site where if we pull in, it's easy out, probably right turn only, so easy access. And when you come back in, if you have to cross traffic, it's not as bad, crossing that over. But to cross 4 lanes of traffic to get out makes it very tough. So what are some of the advantages of moving into a new site? Well, again, we talked about the flow and efficiency. Again, we're not putting plows on and off every day. So that's one of the things that be very efficient at working at. Where am I at here? Some of the efficiencies will be how the shop is set up with the flow. You want to have your parts in the middle. Right now we got people working all over, parts coming in all over, so it's a flow. Vehicle longevity, the truck wash is huge. Right now we do have a manual truck wash, very poor lit, very small. We bring in bigger equipment. We actually need to keep the doors open. They have automatic washers. According to my consultant, they figure a vehicle well wash will extend its life by 20%. So that is just huge right there. Again, the plow trucks, now we start talking plow trucks, they're $350,000 when we go buy a plow truck. So you got to maintain those vehicles. We'll have better inspections on those well-lit areas. The drivers and their CDL, part of it is they need to do a walk around before they go out. It's tough to do a walk around in a poorly lit area when the trucks are so tight you can't even walk around the trade. Inventory control, we oversee over $1 million worth of parts. So to have a central place that's all secure, right now we have some stuff sitting in some places. We have our tire room off on the side. We have very little control over our parts. Site and personal security, we've already had, we walked out one time to our conveyors, and the copper wire was cut off our conveyors. Copper was high at that time. We lost all the copper wire for our conveyors. So, better monitoring system, fencing area. The workplace attraction, well vented. Right now, our welding area is not vented very well at all. We went over to Eclair. They have a separate bay just for their welding area. When we weld, all those fumes are going through the area. And the ability to attract employees. Talking to the commissioner over in Eau Claire County when we took the tour, he said he had a number of people that had left Eau Claire County Highway, came back to work for him after they seen the facility. Nice place, people want to come work for you. It's easier to attract and maintain workers. Manager, supervisor, and control, that direct line of sight to your employees, where the employees have a better access to you is key. And the managers all working collaborative in one area. Right now, we got manager on one side, we have a break room, then we have manager on the other side, so we're kind of all around there. And future trends, everybody wants to be green and efficient. The building we have right now is neither. And if you want to handle this one, or?
Sure, I can, is this mine? Sure. So as Jim said, we're trying to give you the overview of why this has been a topic of conversation. Not trying to convince you that, I know Jim laid a lot of advantages to potentially moving, but the presentation again is what has been done. That backstory Jim just laid is the backstory to why have we been looking through those studies, facilities from the 30s. A lot of this stuff, the additions, it's not unique to highway. We did the same thing as a county. We acquired facilities and put people in facilities without having an overarching strategy relative to efficiency. Again, over the last several years, we've done a lot of things to consolidate that footprint. So that's the backstory to, okay, what is the question or the series of questions that are going to be before the board in the next several months? This slide is simply to say we're really not unique in that. A lot of counties were in a similar place back in the early half of the 1900s. We built facilities. Excuse me. Built facilities. They're in a state of disrepair, and you need to make a tough decision, which is either substantial investment in your current site or relocation to a different site. So this, Jim and his team just reached out and tried to find information about, all right, in the last 5 years, counties that have made significant investments in a new highway facility. Those are on the left, and then we backed it off to the 10 years. So you see, again, we're not overly unique in that. Marathon County has put a lot of energy and effort, of course, into the facilities that I've talked about thus far. Anything you want to add on this?
There's over 20.
Okay, there you go, over 20. So with this project, after 10 plus years, I just want to go back and again, ground everyone on one of the things that I started with, that idea of consolidation, the need to do that work with parks, consolidate with parks. You think that's a really good idea, right? And I think the board back decades ago thought that makes sense. Look for a place for parks and highway to be on a shared site. They do a lot of similar things, different scales perhaps, but plowing snow, cutting grass, vehicle maintenance, equipment maintenance, that makes sense. The good news about finding a different way to consolidate, as the board has, is that if you were going to combine parks with highway, you really do restrict yourself in where you can locate, because Parks Department has to focus a lot of its time and energy on the Wausau Park System, because we, again, are that joint city-county parks department. So the opportunity now, again, is to look at this. How can we effectively look at the highway department and its multiple shops as a system? And one of the areas that we don't have a specific time frame on, but similarly, the issue with our Mosinee shop is at some point, there's going to be direction from the FAA that it can't be there. Don't know when. I can't stand up here and tell you, hey, we got to be out next week or 5 years or 10. But with the evolution of regulations, my understanding is we can't be in our current location long-term. I don't know what long-term means, but it has allowed us to think about, again, the highway department as a system to see, is there an opportunity to locate in such a form and fashion that perhaps we can consolidate. So that takes me to what is being done now. So that's the backstory of what has been done, all those studies that Jim talked about. What have staff been tasked with by the various committees in the near term? Recently, the Infrastructure and HR Finance and Property Committee asked us to move forward with attempting to secure offers to purchase on that potential site that Jim identified, and we have made some really good headway on that. And as I'll talk about later, we do anticipate being able to bring to you some offers to purchase for you to ultimately decide how to move forward. You'll see at one of my later slides, at each and every step throughout this process, the board is going to have the opportunity to, one, you have to decide what to do. But two, just because you make one step forward doesn't necessarily mean you have to make the next. Just because you acquire land, certainly there are costs with that, and there are consequences to doing that. But at the end of the day, simply because you buy land doesn't mean you have to ultimately build the highway shop. We have a thing we'll talk about in just a minute, and infrastructure is going to talk about moving forward. We bought a lot of property on 28th Avenue, thinking we were going to relocate a road. We have not relocated that road. And in fact, I fully anticipate yet this year we will sell the parcels we previously bought, because that's no longer the plan. So land acquisition, I'll talk about later. In the near future, you'll see some things will be brought to you in that realm. Funding strategy, this happened last year. We engaged our financial consultants, PMA, to get some initial estimates. What does it look like if you were going to borrow funds for a highway shop? We were in Eau Claire. My recollection, Eau Claire borrowed for the entire cost of that highway shop. And of course, I think we all know when we borrow, right, when we bond, you not only have the costs of actual building or borrowing the funds, you have the interest that goes with that, you have bond counsel, you have all those transaction fees that come with that. So we've been doing a fair amount of work with them, and Sam is going to be here to talk through kind of, even if we look at some fresh numbers, what that might look like. Again, you're not going to have to do anything today. This is just for information to help you get that background and help us understand what additional information you have, but we have been working with them. And as Jim referenced, a portion of that initial funding strategy, our thought process, based on the direction from infrastructure and HR finances, look to see what opportunity exists to utilize those highway reserves beyond working capital. And then the other part that was discussed at HR Finance and Property and that we're getting information on is the idea of what other pieces might fold into that capital stack to create the facility. So you'd have borrowing. I'll say that one last because my hope is that's a smaller percentage. But utilization of highway reserves, borrowing, but also the direction we got was, okay, what other opportunities exist? Are there properties that if we relocate off of West Street, currently in our West Side Master Plan, that's envisioned for park-related use. But there were questions asked that, hey, what could be potential revenue from redeveloping that? So we've engaged a local appraiser with real estate background to try to help us get some idea as to what that might look like for redevelopment and potential revenue to either offset on the front end the cost or increase the taxable valuation, because of course right now owned by the county, or under the future, if you follow the vision of the West Side Master Plan, it would stay in county hands off the tax roll. What might it look like if it were back on the tax roll in terms of annual tax revenue? So we're working on that information as well. That's that redevelopment strategy I just talked about, maximizing taxable valuation. And then the last part is, and Jim can probably speak to this better, with the various studies that have been done, the site selection studies, the space needs analysis, there were rough projections for cost of a building that were well in excess of 50 million, in fact, just shy of $60 million, which Jim then spoke with colleagues, and that seemed a bit out of our expectation based on that map that I showed before with all the stars on it, based on the costs that other facilities have been built utilizing the funds. So Eau Claire, for example, what was that? 32 million. So Jim is trying to get better projections to come back. Of course, we never know. I would never stand up here and tell you, hey, we have an architect who told us a building is going to cost 32 million or 40 million, and that's what it's going to cost. I can tell you what it's going to cost when it's done. I can tell you what the bid is going to be when we get the bids back, but even then, once you get the bids back, we do our best to control costs, but there are things that can happen to increase that, but we are trying to, on the front end, mitigate that likelihood with better cost projections. Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So our architect had brought in a local consultant firm, construction firm to, gauge. Again, we don't have design plans. Architects aren't cheap to come up with a final exact estimate. You're going to spend, most of these fees are in that 4.5% range. So if you're looking at a $40 million project, you're looking in excess of $1 million for design. So we won't have any number like that, but based on our concept drawings, he came back more in the ballpark. Again, these are ballparks, and these are off a napkin, if you might say, probably more in that $40 to $45 million range than the 60. Again, those are rough estimates off a napkin, but those are the numbers that the construction company came up with. Troy from Facilities is trying to get together with a few other firms, so try to lock down the ballpark number a little bit closer, but those are the numbers that we gave Sam kind of to base her financial statements off of.
So this is the financial strategy slide that I can cover before it gets too complex and Sam can take it. But this is, again, high level based on the direction we've gotten to just start to rough out what a capital funding strategy might look like. And it just is here to show you the potential of utilizing, and you'll see the $30 million from reserve and then bonding for $15 million. So I'll start with a high level of, so like Jim said, that's that 40 to 45, went on the high end there. The underlying idea as one of the strategies that I subscribe to, I think, is sound fiscal strategy, and my colleagues around the state, we talk about this often, and I encourage when you have considerations about how to structure borrowing, it's been my experience that looking at your overall debt capacity and your debt levy and our borrowing amount we need to service, our debt service schedules, it's good to keep those things relatively flat. What is really problematic is if you have debt fall off and then a project 2 years later come on, the roller coaster of levy is bad. You want to strategize so that you have projects. We have more capital needs than we have money. I think we all know that, right? So how do you structure your capital needs in such a way in terms of timing to mitigate the fluctuation with your existing resources? So that's kind of the strategy that Sam will talk through in just a minute. And this is, just for background, this should look pretty familiar. This is in your budget each of the last couple of years, this debt schedule. So you can go back and look in your annual budgets to see what our schedules look like. And there's a summary schedule actually in the 2025 budget that I prefer more than this because this is a lot. It's all the individual borrowings over years. And then we have a consolidated one that kind of wraps everything together. Do you want anything to go on this one?
Yeah, I can use that to start
Sure.
structuring that conversation. All right, so this slide here is to show you the different debts that we currently have out and when they're kind of dropping off that debt schedule. As Administrator Leonard said, to keep it somewhat steady, there's some strategies behind bonding that would allow then the tax or the mill rate to only increase maybe 5% on there based off of the 2025 factorizations. But I just wanted to put this out there so you guys can kind of see where some of those ebbs and flows are going to be that were currently discussed. So when we talk about bonding, the strategies behind it is you can do a shorter term to save on interest, all the way up to a longer term to, again, remain steady on that mill rate for the debt service. Based off of the estimation, if you did a 10-year, you could start off with 4 or 5 years at a lower mill rate at 6% or 6 cents. My apologies. But then in some of the more expensive years when the principal is being paid, it could go up to 18 cents on the mill rate. If you did something like a 20-year, you'd remain close to 5 cents to 8 cents on the mill rate. And then in regards to the highway reserves that we had, off of that fund balance, we are still remaining strong in there. We did anticipate about 26 million, so the 4 million could be made up in the next year or two to make sure that we're offsetting that. Part of the debt aspect of this wasn't supposed to happen until next year in second or third quarter, so those numbers could potentially go down, just to keep that in mind.
All right, so again, this financial information is just to tell you where we're at now. Certainly, as I show you later, at each step of kind of the next steps, we recognize and fully expect that you're going to ask us for more information. But it's just to tell you what we've done. This is the what have we done portion of the presentation, and now I'm going to start to get into a little bit ahead of myself in terms of what might be next steps. So this is just it says proposed timeline, but this is a timeline you would expect in any capital project. For those of you that have been on the board when you took up the consideration for the Regional Forensic Science Center, it's essentially the same process. But it's just to, again, ground us on what that looks like. First part, if you were to buy land. Second part, architectural services, and the last part is bid and building. We put a little bit of explanation, so when you see this in your email and in the packet in the future, you'll see what does architectural service actually look like. It's a significant portion of the timeline because, as Jim alluded to, it takes a fair amount of time to go from what we have now, which is conceptual, high-level conceptual, just boxes. How much a space needs analysis, right? For those of you that have been on the board a while, you've seen these. Space needs analysis, you go out, you ask, how much space do you need for a certain activity? There's a standard cost per square foot for that activity. That drives the high-level estimates. The next step is to move forward in terms of architectural services. You would get that schematic design. That's still not the drawings you need to build something. Troy's looking at me in the back. There's a big difference. If you have your mouse and you look at you're at an architectural drawing and you back way out, it starts to look like schematic. But when you drive way in, you see where everything is. So it's a process to get through that architectural service piece. And then the last part is once we have construction documents, that's when we can release an RFP that then is used to secure the bids for any public work. In this case, it would be a building of a building. So that entire process, you're at least a year for the architectural, and then the building is a year as well. So we have time, and that's going to be my next thing to wrap up here in terms of what are the phase deliverables. This is more detail on what I just gave you, schematic design, the difference between schematic design, how we design, we get development done, and then construction documents. I'm not going to go over all that. It'll be in your the email, and we'll talk about it as we move forward if you decide to move forward. Here are what I want to close with, and then we'll certainly take questions and get additional information moving forward. These are the things that I see bringing to you based on the direction we've gotten to this point. As I alluded to before, offers to purchase. We have made headway on that. We will bring you those offers to purchase for you to look at. They will work through your board process. You can make a decision on them. We will have some before you at the April County Board meeting. You can decide at that point, move forward with the purchase or not. That's a board decision. Staff can't make that decision. That's a statutory requirement that the board has to authorize the purchase of property or the sale. At any one of these points, and this is just my initial thoughts as to how we would continue that engagement, it's very similar to the Regional Forensic Science Center process that I thought worked very well. From my perspective, for the board to offer input, happy to change the process if you wish. But the next step would be to continue to refine that comprehensive funding strategy based on the better information we get with our consultants, as well as the information we get relative to redevelopment and potential sale of property that would return funds to the highway reserve. 28th Avenue properties are a good example of those. So we're going to continue to do that. That's HR Finance and Property has given direction, and you, through my annual work plan, the board adopted, trying to divest ourselves of what I'll call some surplus property that was acquired with initial plans that, based on board direction to this point, is no longer necessary. We'll continue to work to develop that funding. So we'll work with HR Finance to refine that strategy. My sense is that ultimately a proposal should be brought to the board for full board vetting on what that capital stack would look like if you're looking to move forward. The next step is secure necessary design documents. My sense, similar to the Forensic Science Center process, the board directed staff to to fund a lot of the project, the purchase of land, the design documents. We funded those things. Now, ultimately, we didn't need to go out to borrow, but we funded those things in stages. We do have highway reserves sufficiently enough to go through a lot of this process without making a decision on whether or not the board, if borrowing is needed to make it happen, you can put the borrowing later in the process. And at any point, if the decision of the board is different, pardon the pun, but you can take an off-ramp. You can say, yeah, we're not going to do it. Let's divest ourselves of the properties that we previously approved the purchase of. There certainly are some sunk costs at any one of these steps. For example, if you do get design documents, there's a sunk cost there. However, the designs don't go bad. You could still, if at a later date you wanted to dust those off and use them, you still have them. But my point with this, the way we have, from a staff perspective, laid this out, it's not until you get down to that last step of, hey, do we want to do this, and borrowing is going to be needed, that once you decide that resolution, that then the project happens, right? So I tried to lay out based on the direction we've had to this point, to break down the next steps as granularly as possible, but leave you those off-ramps. So I know that's a lot it was an hour. But that's, again, what we've done based on the 18 years of direction and kind of what's coming forward. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want us to take questions now, certainly can do that. And this is I own this. So this is not the board saying this is what you want. I laid it out based on what I thought, based on the direction I've gotten to this point.
So certainly, let's open it up to questions. Questions from the board on what was presented. Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question was, so I had a conversation with the commissioner in Taylor County, and they recently built a new highway department there. And he suggested to use a construction manager over a general contractor. That's what they did, and they saved a quite large sum of money. I don't know what your guys' plan is for that.
Great question. So in this part here, the high-level proposed timeline, our recent experience has been, we're fans of construction manager at risk as an approach. And how you utilize that construction manager, I'll be the high level. If you have specific stuff, Troy is in the back. But my advice to you is absolutely, let's move, if you were going to do this project, we would fit an RFP for construction management at risk as part of that. So what it essentially does is it brings your construction manager or your kind of what you might generally think as a general contractor, and Troy, maybe you want to start walking up to correct all the misstatements I'm going to give. But you get them involved early on in the process so they can help as you refine that design. And then they do own a lot of the risk. If there are issues, they own the overage potential. We did that with a lot of our work at the Lakeview campus. We did that with the Regional Forensic Science Center. So yes, I mean, I think the strategy across Wisconsin, particularly for larger counties, is to move towards that construction manager at risk. And I would say certainly even smaller counties where you don't have necessarily as highly skilled facilities people as we have between Troy and Craig and their teams. We do a lot of facility work. Construction management is an excellent way to go. Troy, anything you want to add on that?
No, you hit that right on the head. We used the Regional Forensic Science Center in the A&B building, the last two that we used.
Here, you can talk right here.
We used that delivery method in both the last two projects we've done. The Regional Forensic Science Center has been a extremely successful project using that. The contract that we use is an AIA document that puts a guaranteed maximum price in there, so we don't see any outrageous additional change orders that come into play. That is written right in the contract. If the contract goes over that, the construction manager at risk absorbs those. A really unique part of that is every one of the construction managers that we deal with, and we're talking A&B building, 1000 Lakeview Drive, and the Regional Forensic Science Center, we spent, it was a $5,000 to $10,000 pre-construction fee. Not really any real hard cost at all, but they go through your estimating costs, they'll go through your constructability, they'll be the eyes and the ears for the architect because they're typically out bidding projects all over the place, so their construction costs are really right up to the minute what they bid last week or that day. So it's a very, very efficient delivery method that we've been finding great success with.
Supervisor Rosenberg, please.
You have satellite workshops. I don't even know how many there are, and I don't know what they involve. But what are the needs of them in the next, say, 5 years, or the desires?
To keep our level of service where we're at. So right now we have our Wausau main facility. We have a shop we call our Stratford shop. It's actually Edgar Andrews, but it's on Highway 97 north of Stratford. We have a shop in Abbotsford, excuse me, the shop in Abbotsford, the shop in Mosinee, and a shop in Hatley. Those three facilities we just run in winter. So usually we like to get them manned by deer hunting and till spring. So anywhere from March until July 4th in Wisconsin. So we just run those facilities in the winter. We're hoping, like Lance had mentioned, that we'll be able to close down one of those facilities with the addition of this shop. But if we want to keep our level of service where we're at, we do need to have those outlying shops because Marathon County is the biggest county in the state. If we would come out of Stratford, we would get up to the Abbotsford area or north up in the Milan area with our trucks, it would just take too long.
But they're in good condition or reasonable condition?
The Abbotsford shop and the Hatley shop were built, I believe, right around 94 we built those, so those are fairly good. Our Stratford shop, if you do remember, we had a fire probably 10 years ago already out there, so we had to rebuild one of our main storage units, so we're pretty good in Stratford. The main shop down there that they use is built in the 90s. So the Mosinee shop that we're looking at closing, not so good. It's a pretty old shop, a lot of issues down there. And then our Wausau facility.
Thank you.
And it'll be 10 years ago in next April, because it happened on the second day of my first term as chairman. So I know it well, when the Stratford shop burned. Supervisor Wilhelm, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually able to talk to a county supervisor from Clark County, and they built a brand-new facility for $10 million. I don't know the size. In the last 5 years, when I talked to him, he was explaining it to me. Now, do you guys have land picked out right now that you're looking at possibly bringing to us, or is it?
I'll let Jim take what happened in Clark County, because I don't know. But we will have offers to purchase. We've talked about specific sites. We're still finalizing some of those conversations, but we will have that before the full board in April. I don't know about Clark County, Jim.
Yeah, I don't know the square footage, Clark County. I'm pretty good friends with Brian over there. I know he said our facility is nothing like we're building. We're looking at 240,000 square feet altogether. And when I did talk to him, that 10 million, you know, when I mentioned my 40 to 45 million, that does include the construction management, architectural fees. If you're looking at the building itself, you are under that 40 million. All those fees are going to add up over 5 million. That 10 million did not include any of those fees. That was just construction, and it didn't include their main building
And
and contingencies.
how large is the facility in Mosinee that you're looking at replacing? Or
It stores 3 trucks. It's a pretty small facility, very small. 800 tons we store of salt, so it's 500 ton, I believe, in salt. So it's a very small facility down there. But with that being said, you know, it doesn't matter how big a shop you have. We still have fuel tanks. They're smaller. You still have to have a scale. So we have all those entities with that facility.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple questions. One is, where is the kind of the outlay, the comparison to redeveloping the current site, which is 8-ish acres? Do we have any kind of cost analysis of what it would be to replace that, whether it be to bulldoze or whatever? Because I think it's important to consider, you know, given the location we have now, which I was on the tour, certainly needs to be improved. I'm going to tell you right now, you know, Brendan was there and a couple other folks, that the site that we currently have is in disrepair. So you're going to have to either rebuild that or build another site. So I'm looking for where is the same PowerPoint to say this is what it would take to rebuild that. So that's one. The second thing is, regardless of the site that we would be looking at to develop, you mentioned certain things like cross traffic, you know, making a left turn. How are we supposed to say that the next site that we're looking at isn't going to have those same issues? If you look at, you know, I won't say it, but if you look at a certain location that might be considered, do we have enough movement of the trucks away from the current traffic to get to a major highway when you might have a lot of passenger traffic? So has that been considered? The third thing I would ask is, we're talking about the West Side Master Plan, we're talking about the ice rink, and I really haven't heard any, over the course of my 5 years being on the board, how do all these things mesh? Okay, so there's going to be talk about the current ice rink and how much money needs to be put into that to fix it. There's talk about the West Side Master Plan and how does that work? Well, part of that is getting rid of the current highway department location, blitzing that, where's all the, I've never heard like, here are the 5 things that would tie all that together to say, this is the plan for Marathon County. And I just haven't heard that. So that's kind of my third question. And I'll say it again, going on that tour, and anyone who went on that tour can speak to this, Eau Claire has a wonderful shop. And it was really nice to see that. And it's not over the top. It's not, glitzy. There's not like, gold faucets or anything like that. But what we have here is really poor. So there has to be something done. Those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
We will certainly be able to give you information with the facilities. We have had them, as Jim said, walk through and kind of what would it cost to just address the real problem areas. I think to your point, Vice Chair Dickinson, excuse me, we'll be able to give you a number to what it would cost to fix up what we have and address, like Jim showed you the pictures, the doors, the broken piece of the structural pieces on the side of the salt shed, fix some of the drainage. We will be able to bring you that, and I know is it 6 million?
8, I believe 8.
8 million right now based on what we have. It doesn't fix, as Jim talked about, the location aspect. I think I made a note about your closeness. I termed it closeness to highway and traffic viability. We will make sure that when we bring the offers to purchase, we can show you what those where the site would be located and how it would, I'll ask Jim to address when we bring that forward in April, how it would be advantageous, if at all. The last part about how does the West Side Master Plan and this interact, I'm going to give you this is probably going to be viewed as a punt. The West Side Master Plan, you guys can change at any point you want, and that's actually one of the things that, based on the HR Finance and Property Committee discussion that was had, like, hey, this is going to cost money if we relocate the highway department. What if we didn't keep it on the tax roll, the part on West Street? What if we redeveloped it? What would that look like for taxable valuation? It was based on those comments that we went out and secured the appraiser to give us an estimate. Jim just forwarded me the email today. So I don't feel comfortable opining on that because I really haven't read it, but we'll make sure we bring that back. So what do you want to stitch together in terms of a long-term vision about your facilities and your properties? I'm happy to bring information to the board or the various committees. At the end of the day, you guys can change that direction at any point. You've done a lot. We are in a much better position, and credit goes entirely to the board over the last several years. The consolidated footprint you're going to have in terms of sites, I hope to be bringing RFPs to divest or redevelop, depending on whatever direction I get. River Drive, Thomas Street buildings, you've already approved sales of a couple of parcels of property, including a parking lot for redevelopment. So you've done a lot. This is kind of that next step, and I think I'm inferring from some of the questions, there is absolutely the need for staff to have some direction. Jim's not going to like to hear this, but if the decision is to stay, we will need to make investments, as the vice chair referenced, and we can tell you what those look like. Or if the decision is to move, we can bring information to you. And I know that's hard. That's going to be a tough decision because it comes with trade-offs. But I will strive to have that information as much as we can in April. The cost to fix the current site with a breakdown, with the offers to purchase, the traffic flow, what that might look like, and how they turns to get to what I'll call the highways and the flyover. Because right now, if it wasn't for the 4 lanes of traffic and Quick Trip, if it wasn't for the people, Jim would be in a great spot. It's pretty close to the highway. But we'll bring that. And then as it relates to the West Side Master Plan, we can also show you that as it exists now. Your vision was to the plan was to have that be where, if you built new ice sheets, that's where they would go. So it does relate, as the vice chair said, to the next topic later in your agenda about what's the future of ice. Thankfully, I will wrap up my non-answer to these questions with, you've done a lot of facility work in the last couple of years. Knock on wood, I think between ice and highway, I don't see anything too big on the horizon after that. You've addressed a lot of deferred maintenance in the last 5 years.
Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, with Eau Claire facility being on 23 acres, and they have 200,000 square feet total, with 140 being the main building and 60 being the yard buildings. What would we be needing an additional 40,000 square feet for, and why do we need almost double the amount of acreage, or is that just because the parcel that's available is 40 acres?
So the parcels, we're looking at the original parcel that we looked back in 2018, 19, that was 40 acres. We're looking at probably about the exact same acreages. I'm trying to find that 23 to 25 acres for this site. So we're not looking for that 40 acres at this time. And for the additional is, we maintain about 880 state lane miles of state roads. Eau Claire maintains 412, somewhere's in there. County miles, we maintain 614-ish. Eau Claire County maintains, I think, about half of that. So we have about double the amount of highways. So we have more routes, more equipment than they do.
Supervisor Enders, please.
Oh, thank you. So the real question I have is the plan going to consist of a continuation of the plan for consolidated services under one roof? My question is, does the project need to be reevaluated to bring in other departments to move forward on both the strategic needs of the highway and any other possible departments who have also facility needs comparable to this, and to continue making progress on service consolidation with compartmentalization in mind with respect to the layout, design, and costs? I'm cognizant of the fact that we're not just talking about quality of life, we're talking about public safety as well. And my only question is, if we commit to this investment, how can we ensure to our constituents we have maximized the utility of not just this project, but consolidated service investment as a cost control mechanism?
Compound question, objection. I'll start with the first one. Is there a need for us to continue to look at consolidation of other departments with highway? My answer from an operational standpoint is I don't believe so. You will have consolidated between your courthouse and the Lakeview campus the vast majority of sites that are ripe for, what I'll say are ripe for consolidation, that were ripe for consolidation with the highway department back when this started. And I'll just go through the list that Jim very keenly put in his slide. Parks, Rec, and Forestry, based on the current site that is under evaluation, it would not make sense to co-locate with Parks, Rec, and Forestry because it's outside the city limits of Wausau. And all of the efficiencies you'd gain with consolidating of the main highway shop in Wausau and the Mosen East site would be more than lost with the work that Parks has to do in Wausau under your current system. Sheriff's Office vehicle maintenance, there's, I think, some maintenance that we could continue to have done there, but it is maintenance on a completely different scale of what Jim's mechanics are doing with respect to maintenance. Conservation, Planning, and Zoning, that's a department that has been consolidated into the Lakeview campus. Similarly, the Medical Examiner's Office, with the work you've done relative to the Regional Forensic Science Center, no need for consolidation there. And lastly, Emergency Management, you've made some decisions. The board has given direction over the last several years we've actually divested and are currently in the process of divesting a fair amount of equipment. We've signed intergovernmental agreements to have other governments primarily the city of Wausau with the fire department, take over a lot of what had been our emergency response for hazardous materials. They have to maintain all that same equipment, and rather than us duplicate that, we have contracted with them. So short answer, you don't need to do it for emergency management either. They've actually been located to the Lakeview campus. Like I said before, the board has given a lot of direction to consolidate building sites. The only other sites you have that are in the major metro area of Wausau, again, are not ripe for consolidation in my judgment. The library, doesn't make sense to move it. It's its own simple thing I shouldn't say simple thing, it's its own standalone thing in Wausau as part of a larger library system. And then you really do have Parks, Recreation, and Forestry that was on River Drive. Their Parks administration is moving into the buildings you own on the University of Stevens Point, Wausau campus, which is good from a consolidation standpoint because it's much closer to this Parks operation shop, which is on Party Street. So from my perspective, no, I don't know, Jim, if there's anything you want to add on just the general highway shop side.
The only thing I could add is I had a conversation with Sheriff Billup about the sheriff office vehicle maintenance. Again, that's something that we could talk to them about, but it would just be them using our existing bay and using us for higher level situations that they're doing right now. But that would be the only thing. And we discussed that, we could probably put a cubicle if a deputy needs to have his vehicle worked on. So that would be one thing, but he feels right now what they're doing is sufficient for the sheriff's department.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to clear up. Actually meant Clark County. I misspoke there, and it was Brian Duell over there I talked to. And I believe I sent the information to the infrastructure back, I believe it was the beginning of December. So I don't recall the exact numbers, but I believe it was around 29,000 square feet. And I think it was like around $8 million their cost was. But I can, if anybody wanted that information, I can forward it to them. So, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Great presentation. We'll move on to review and discussion of voting items and on the Tuesday's meeting. We'll start with item 9A1, board appointment, and I'd ask the clerk to read the appointment, please.
Reappointing Patrick Schreiner of Athens to the Marathon County Board of Adjustment to complete a 3-year term to expire June 30th, 2027.
Questions on that appointment? Okay, moving on to ordinances under item 9B1, amendments to the Marathon County Code of Ordinances for Chapter 16, Chapter 19, and Sections 2.06 and 7.125 of the Wausau City Parks subsection. Questions on that update? Okay, moving on to item 9B2, a revision to Chapter 3 of the Marathon County Code of Ordinances related to cooperative purchasing, Ordinance 0-13-25. Any questions? All right, we will move on then to resolutions from the Environmental Resources Committee. Item 9C1A, the Town of Wausau rezone, commercial and light manufacturing to agricultural, resolution 13-25. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item 9C, 1B, the Town of Wausau, creation of a zoning ordinance, keeping of fowl in residential districts, Resolution 14-25. Okay, moving on to item 9C, 2A from the Environmental Resources Committee and Park Commission, a potential authorization to submit a letter of commitment for grant match and funding support for building resilient infrastructure and communities grant. Resolution 15-25. Any questions? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Can there be an explanation of what this is intended for? Because reading the resolution, they talk about a safe, like a safe house. Is it R1525? Thank you.
Administrator Leonard or
Sure. I'll
Jamie?
start and Jamie can
Fill in.
elaborate. This is all related to the ice arena. So the letter of intent of commitment is the authorization from the board to allow us to include a letter that essentially doesn't commit the board to anything. It says if at a later date you commit to accepting grant funds associated with the construction of a safe room, that you agree to do what you were saying you would do with construction of the safe room, which I think makes logical sense that they'd want that. But Jamie, anything you wanted to, I just want to start, it doesn't actually commit you to doing anything. It just is a prerequisite to us to apply for the potential for funding, design, and funding for construction potentially, if the long-term direction for the board is to make some improvements relative to the ice arena.
Yeah, so what I can add with that is we currently had received a $300,000 grant through this program for a study of a safe room that would go, and how we wrote it, the emergency management director and I, 2 years ago, wrote it where the FEMA is looking for safe rooms within communities, and they're providing funding to study those safe rooms and then also to construct them. So we had one to study building a safe room within a improved facility, and that happened to be the ice arena at the time. So the study included, well, it still does, it's ongoing in some of the aspects of just the feasibility of a safe room within that new construction, because it's very compatible to that type of structure. So that facility, or that scoping study was done, and then the next part of it is to reapply to this BRIC grant for the construction of the safe room portion of it. They don't cover any other costs of the rest of the facility. But the BRIC grant, if awarded, is a 75-25% match. So this letter is just saying that if you were awarded funds and if you accepted those funds, 25% is the responsibility of the county, and you can fund that either, if you choose that, it would be funded either through levy dollars, in-kind donations. It doesn't specify how that 25% would be matched, but it's only if the grant is received and accepted.
Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you. Just wondering, what is the wording project funding support? Is that, I know you said that it doesn't, but why would we include in the second whereas that we're committing to project funding support if the decision to actually do it comes later?
It wouldn't come later if you're awarded the grant for the safe room. That's a part of the building, and then if you accept the grant, you have 36 months to build the safe room. The safe room is part of a larger project. So what that's saying is that the county is supporting moving forward with that larger project that would include that safe room. And that, by saying supporting in there, is just saying that you support. So if the ice arena is approved to be reconstructed and the safe room is included in that, whatever the cost of that final project would be, the amount above the safe room, which is the rest of the building, would be supported by the county, however it's funded. And so that means if it's, a large donation, fundraising, county dollars, that's all for later, but that's what the funding support means of the larger project. You can't just, if you accept the money at that time for the safe room, you can't just build a safe room because it's inside a larger facility. But it's still not, this letter is only to go along with the grant that says, if you accept the grant and take it, you will do that. So it still doesn't obligate you to anything at this point.
Other questions? Supervisor Jensen, please.
Is there a deadline on submitting the application for this grant?
Yes, the application has already been submitted to Wisconsin Emergency Management by the end of February. They require everything to be submitted to them, and then it goes to FEMA by April 18th. So this letter is something that they would require in order to officially submit it on April 18th. But our portion goes through the state first, and then they officially submit it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. We'll move on to item 9C3, Environmental Resources Committee, Parks Commission, and Forestry and Rec Commission. Under 9C3A, a consideration of a resolution of the Wisconsin State Legislature and Governor Evers supporting the renewal of the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. Resolution 16-25. Questions? Okay, moving up, Supervisor Marshall, please.
I see that it says fiscal impact none, but if we're asking the state to support this program, there will be a fiscal impact to every taxpayer in the state of Wisconsin. So I know I did send out information on the debt that we currently have as the state of Wisconsin, and the fact that for the number of public lands are numerous, and we are paying on that debt for previous purchases. As a state, we're paying over $1 million a week just to pay off what we've purchased in the past for public lands. So I'm disappointed that there's not really any information on, we're talking about the benefits here, but nobody's giving us information on the costs and the costs that we've already incurred. Thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So based upon Supervisor Marshall's comment, is there any understanding of what the cost is to us? Thank you.
I can try to take that and I'll answer it shortly. I don't. If you want me to do a taxpayer analysis to say what percentage of any individual property tax payer, or I don't know how I would do that, but if you ask me to do a thing, I'll do my best to bring you the information. But I certainly don't have it.
Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 116 of the packet, it goes over a lot of the information about the program, and there it states it costs $11 for each Wisconsin resident each year. And it says that it's less than a fishing license, but that's for every single person that lives here in Wisconsin. So it's, if you have a family of 6, it's an extra tax of $66. So, and then you also have to pay for your state park sticker and everything else. So that's all I wanted to add.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to support this stewardship grant resolution. Counties that are thriving in Wisconsin have a majority of their land in private land ownership. Currently, Wisconsin owns over 5.9 million acres in land. Imagine the loss of tax revenue and that to the loss of private property ownership as well. And when you look at the statistics, the poorest counties in our state have the largest amount of government government-owned land. In common sense, your tax base is at the lowest and your cost of living at the highest due to the lack of development because there isn't a source of affordable property. With the least amount of growth, development, and opportunity available, currently Wisconsin has a debt of $452 million with a stewardship fund, and that equates to, from the information I got from Supervisor Marshall, there's $80 million annually to the, or biannually to the Wisconsin taxpayers. And I think that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
I believe the Legislative Fiscal Bureau prepares a biennial report on the stewardship fund, but this is a fund that not only goes for purchasing of state lands, but we use as a county to purchase lands, fill in our county forest, and it has applications relative to park improvements throughout the county, and communities can apply for it. It is a benefit to the residents, and we can debate it more on Tuesday and in the merits, but I think it's worthwhile investment in extending this, and historically it's enjoyed strong bipartisan support.
Supervisor Lemmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just pulled up our strategic plan. Objective 5.2 specifically says, promote sound land use decisions that conserve and preserve natural resources and decisions with economic development and growth. We have strategies C and F. C reads, identify and preserve unique regional areas for natural resource protection and environmental remediation. Strategy F says acquire land for public park and forest use to retain natural landscapes and resources. Additionally, outcome measure number 3 states by December 31st, 2024, an average of 320 acres of land per year will be acquired for the Marathon County Parks and Forest System. I don't know where we're at with that outcome measure, if there's going to be a report coming up, but this certainly supports our goals as a county. So I feel it is very appropriate to support it. I will be supporting this measure.
Supervisor Seifelt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This program supports everything that involved with recreation, and to not have this support would be devastating to our forestry department, because when we do purchase land, and the only way we purchase land is somebody comes to us and wants to sell the land to the county. So the Nell Stewardship Program does help us, or supports us with money to buy land, and we pay it back through timber sales. That money we get back through there. Plus, the Village of Hatley just recently sent in a resolution supporting this because they get support through the Nell Stewardship Program through their Memorial Park and for the Ice Age Trail. So there's more than just the forestry part of it, is that it's getting supported. And it does help support our lakes, streams, everything to do with recreation. I just can't see why we cannot support this. Thank you.
Other discussion? Other discussion? Okay, we will move on to item 9C. Supervisor Marshall, sorry.
Is it possible to get what percentage of land is owned publicly for our federal forests, our state forests, our county parks, our municipal parks, our managed cropland that our private people give public access to. Can we get a number for what percentage of Marathon County is already in recreational activities from all those levels of government?
I'm sure we can. I take it you want that before Tuesday. In terms of, just want to make sure I understand the request. In terms of federal lands, I believe the chair knows this, but I don't think we have an extremely small amount. I think there's just a single radio site that.
There's an old radar site up in Ackley that called the Anawa radar site. That's the only federal land that the county has currently.
But we can get total acreage of county forests. I know we have that. We can get total acreage. It'll be accurate. It won't be precise for parks. Are there other areas you said you wanted? I don't know.
That I don't know. We can look and see if Tom can find that out through the DNR, but I'm not sure that we have access to that data.
Okay, we can look through it, see if one of the layers on our maps has that. Let me make a note. So county forests, county parks, and managed forests. Okay. Oh, state lands, okay.
Okay, Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe, if I recall right, because I looked this up before, it's actually on the county website for the county parks and the county forestry. I believe it's around 33,000. And I don't know the state land isn't on there, but I believe the Mead Wildlife is under state and Rim Mountain. I'm not sure which other ones, but thank you.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would say, I've never been supportive of the 325 acre purchase per year plan. I've spoken out about that. I think we have to be, it isn't about, protecting the land. I think what it becomes is the government owning more land. And even if a landowner wants to come to us and say, hey, I want to sell you some land, it isn't necessarily our responsibility to say, hey, we're going to do that. Maybe there's other opportunities for that. And that's really just, in the questions that I've had about in this and others, with forestry and such, is it isn't that we can't maintain the land for public use and for good purposes. We have to be very careful about when government becomes the landowner and how much are we going to do that, because it does have impact beyond just saying, hey, we're protecting land. Thank you.
Supervisor Rosenberg, please.
I'm not sure, but I don't think we ever hit that 360. I don't think we hardly hit it, any purchase. It's there, but it's a useless number for us. We don't purchase very much land ever.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Ms. Polly, please.
I just want to point out, too, a lot of the discussion that I've heard on this program is just about the land purchase program. So the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund has a number of funds within it that fund different things. So the funding that goes to the DNR is one pot of money. The funding that goes to land purchases is one pot of money. And then there's another pot of money that is also very important to the area. And if you see in the packet, I included a printout of every community within the county that's received this fund or a grant from this fund since 1989 and its inception. And that's the local unit government portion share. So the program is one program, but it's broken down into different sections, and each section has a funding source and an amount that is divvied up among the applicants. So the local unit government share is what communities can apply to put in trails, to improve riverfronts, to improve natural areas, and anything of a natural infrastructure. So if you look at that spreadsheet, I know it's very small in your packet, but almost every community within the county has received a grant at some point since 1989, whether it is for land purchase or whether it's for a trail construction, a wildlife area, all kinds of different things. So just keep that in mind as you're looking into this before you vote on it, that there's multiple sections of it. And that will probably be looked at by the state as they look at this program.
Other discussion? Okay, we'll move on then to, from the Environmental Resources Committee, Human Resources and Finance and Property Committee, and the Parks Commission. Item 9C, 4A, a consideration of allocation of funds for repair of the ice arena consistent with the provisions, previous direction from Park Commission relative to the short-term repair strategy, Resolution 17-25. Discussion. Supervisor Sandusky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I look at the many communities throughout our county, how many in this county has the county paid for their ice arenas? Two districts, my district is in are Mosinee and Stratford. Stratford don't even have ice arena. Mosinee is supported by the local community. Those are the two I represent. Another one, DC Everest, they fund their own. Several across the county, yet zero funding from Marathon County. This ice arena upgrade does not benefit constituents in my district. I look at how many different sports facilities are funded by private donors and businesses in the area of the facility. Take, for example, the new Mosinee Sports Complex, funded by a lot of private business and private donors. The Halder Park upgrade, that was all private donations. Mosinee River Park upgrade, that was all private, a lot of private donations, just to name a few. Not only this would be a benefit to the community, it also would be a name recognition for the businesses, and also they also will get this as a tax write-off. So my question is to the schools, the Parks Department, other organizations that use this, how much money have you guys fundraised to pay for this project, and how many businesses have you went out and talked to about getting donations? If you go, I would probably support it if you would go out and get, say, 80-90% of the funds, and the county kicked in a little bit, a little portion of it. I mean, then we can talk about it. But if no effort on their part, I can't support this, because it shouldn't burden the taxpayers of the entire county when it's only that small portion of them using it. Thank you very much.
Administrator Leonard?
To your direct question of if it's directed to staff, have we gone out and asked? The short answer is no, we haven't done that. If that's the direction from the board, that the expectation is for some target to be met, please provide that direction. Again, the agenda item is on there based on the direction we've had to this point. This was the strategy that we brought to, Jamie and her team did a great job bringing that short-term strategy to the Park Commission. The Park Commission moved it forward, ERC moved it forward. If there's different direction from the board, let us know what you want us to do, and we will go back and do that.
Supervisor Fudd, please.
Sorry. I personally love hockey. I was at a hockey game last night in Minneapolis. My kids all played hockey. I love ground roots, teaching kids how to skate when they're 3, and they skate for the rest of their lives because they love it. My kids learned to skate in La Crosse. The city of La Crosse owned the Green Island Hockey Arena, and it fell into disrepair, and they were like, man, we can't keep doing this. And so the people who used the hockey arena, the parent club, got together and took care of that. They take care of the ice now. So the city still owns the property. They didn't give them the property because they own the whole thing. But the parent group takes care of the ice. They do all of the maintenance, updating, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's how it happens everywhere, But that was the impetus for those parents to get together and go, hey, we could do this. Those are the people that love it too. You know, the people that love hockey are going to support hockey. Some little kid with their hockey gear comes up to my house and knocks on the door, I'll be giving them a check. But I don't expect everyone to do that because they're not hockey players, you know? That's just my thoughts there.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the construction of this, based upon the plan, would be October 25, 26. Now, we're talking about the West Side Master Plan with a 2 ice sheet rink. So if we, again, going back to what I was talking about before, what is the overall plan? Are we going to spend $1 million, $940,000? What's going to happen to this ice rink when we perhaps, or some other board moves forward with the West Side Master Plan, we move the highway department, we have this, is that going to be raised? Is it just a third? You know, is it another ice rink? So I don't necessarily have an issue, even though I'm in a rural area and been to the current rink twice in 20 years. I don't have an issue with it because there's people in Wausau, Corona and Wetter, you know, who might be using it. There's a lot of people who'd use it, and they're part of the county. I don't have necessarily a problem with that. But one, to think that people outside of this area are coming to Wausau continually to use the rink is not true. And then if it's kind of short-sighted to say, let's put the money into doing this now, when we're not really sure what we're going to do with these other things. So those are my concerns. So if you want to comment on that, thank you.
I'll take it. Apologize. The long-term future of the ice arena is, as I kind of said with the highway shop, that's up to you as the Board of Supervisors. Your historic plan or your current plan relative to the West Side Master Plan, as the Vice Chair pointed out, it called for those ice sheets, excuse me, to be moved outside of their current location and build new on that West Street parcel. Excuse me. Going through. But like any capital project, that's a determination that you make by vote of the board. The direction staff were given was really a function of the fact that those facilities, as was alluded to by Supervisor Foote in a different community, are in a pretty poor state of repair. We purchased this will be accurate, not precise, Jamie will correct me, the ice rink equipment was purchased used more than 50 years ago. Our staff have been doing an exceptional job keeping that facility up and running. I should say this last ice season, we had to open 3 weeks late because we had to open up a whole bunch of areas in the floor in rink 2 to figure out why it wasn't cooling. We weren't being able to make ice in certain areas. There are just a lot of areas that need work. So, as was alluded to, there's a lot of user groups that rely upon that ice, whether it's Wausau Area Youth Hockey, the Wausau School District, the user groups for figure skating, and I know I'm going to miss a bunch, adult hockey, the Cyclones. There's a lot of user groups that have come to rely upon that over the last 50 years. The task staff were given was bring information, and as Jamie alluded to in an earlier item, what does the long-term future look like? It's a big question. We've been looking for the opportunities that may exist to bring in outside dollars, non-Marathon County direct taxpayer dollars that we receive through property tax to fund that. Hence the opportunity to apply for the study we did a couple of years ago for the brick design, which the idea is you apply for the design money, you get the design approved, you apply then for the federal funding to move forward with construction. Not a guarantee, but it's county staff, following the direction of the board, to try to identify all those potential funding avenues that may exist for that long-term fix. In the short term, we had the issues I just referenced earlier about that ice sheet. The Park Commission tasked staff with, okay, we got to come up with a plan on the short term, and this is my characterization, so please, Supervisor Seefeld, correct me if I'm wrong, but hey, what would it take to at least ensure that these user groups have ice next year? Because of their reliance on it. So staff went through and started to put together that plan, and it involved ripping out the floor, putting in all the lines underneath the floor. Think of like a sprinkler system that you might have in your yard, except this yard is covered with concrete. And brine runs through those lines, cools that concrete to make the ice. Well, lines are old. Their cooling equipment is old. Our dehumidification system doesn't work. So a couple of core things we needed to fix. That plan evolved because, just as the vice chair said, man, does it make sense to rip out the floor and fix all the lines when you don't know what the future of that building is? Maybe you don't use it moving forward. Maybe you get out of the ice business. So the Park Commission said, bring us up, what would a plan look like that is the most flexible, that would mitigate risk if we, one, decide, if the county, you, the board, decides to get out of the ice business. So what could we do that we could turn around and essentially take our investment and sell the stuff or repurpose it? So how could it be flexible there? But also be flexible if the county board said, no, we want to stay in the ice business. So staff went back to the drawing board, put their thinking caps on, and that's what the cost structure is that was evaluated first by Park Commission and moved forward to ERC and is before you today. It's that flexible approach. It's addressing the core pieces, the cooling tower, the dehumidification system, and the floor, but it addresses the floor in a different way. We're not ripping out all the floor and laying in new lines. We're buying what's called a mat system, which goes on top of the floor, but we still need to do some repairs to the floor to be able to tie that mat system into our current cooling system and make some critical repairs to what I'll call a primary junction that serves both Rink 1 and Rink 2. If that primary junction were to break, we wouldn't have the ability to cool that concrete to make ice in either. So that is essentially boiled down to a nutshell of what the proposal was that staff brought forward to Park Commission. It was based on the policy direction we want. What would flexibility look like? As was alluded to before, we didn't have conversations with user groups about them funding parts of it. We also, Jamie and I just have been meeting throughout the last couple of days to look at, because one of the questions at HR Finance was, how do you fund this? I think there are some opportunities if the board says, hey, we want to, what could we do differently? I think we have some strategies to bring that number down if that's the direction. If you want us to take more risk, we can take more risk in designing that project. The plan we brought forward for consideration was based on the policy direction to ensure, to the best that we can, that these groups will have ice this coming season. We could take that cooling tower off, and Jamie, what does that save us about?
$120,000.
$120,000. There's risk there, excuse me, but our staff have done very well with that cooling tower, and if we need to replace that piece of capital equipment, it would be problematic, but the floor is the real issue. The floor is that critical issue that we were given the task to bring forward a plan. We can also look at some other ways to fund it differently than dip into your reserves. Met with Jamie earlier this week. You approved in your budget for 2025 a capital project at Marathon Park for the fence, $130,000. If a fence section fails and falls down, we will find a way to fix that with our existing small capital budget. I don't have a small capital budget to fix the floor if it doesn't work. So if you want us to bring back some other ways to do that, we can do that based on direction. But to the vice chair's point, that long-term vision of what to do with ice, the proposal that Parks Commission brought forward to ERC and to the board was that what I'll call gap filler that staff developed based on the direction to ensure ice. If you know you want to get out of the ice business today, you have a lot of user groups that I would suggest we tell as soon as possible, but that's the direction. But we have a couple of other things if you want us to go back and develop a plan to look at how we can fund it differently or how you could approve to fund it differently or phase it. Happy to do that. But that's, again, one of those areas we need the direction. What do you want us to accomplish?
Supervisor Marshall, please.
I would also like to point out that I believe that, Jamie, you had said that we subsidize the cost of providing that ice by 29%. So the users in the fees that they pay only cover 71% on the ice time per hour. So not only are we providing capital, we are subsidizing the operations of the facility. I would also feel more comfortable if the cyclones, the storm, the Wausau West, Wausau East, Merrill districts were contributing to this. This is for them as well as, to a lesser extent, the community at large.
Administrator Leonard, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I think to your point, Supervisor, if there's a desire to direct us to have those conversations, we can. The other way that the board, I always go back to your 3 policy questions, right? What programs or services do you deliver? At what level? And the last one is at what costs? The board, in your annual budget, if you look, I think it's page 162, or it's thereabouts. It's your fee schedule, your appendix. The board sets that. If there's a desire to increase the fees, I can draft a resolution for you guys to consider to do that. There are a lot of ways to achieve, I think, what you're alluding to. It's just, I can't do that. I can't do any of those things. I need the direction to accomplish them. So if you want some alternative proposals, happy to work on that. Just let me know what those are that you're trying to accomplish.
Supervisor Corvelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Supervisor Marshall. You kind of stole some of my comment, but I'm on the same page as Supervisor Marshall as to if we're subsidizing a portion of that without charging enough for the users, we're not covering the costs, then I think we need to increase the cost to the users to cover those maintenance fees. That's my thought. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The HR Finance and Property Committee looked at it, and one of the things, we're really looking at 2 issues. One is a short-term fix, and one is what the long-term plan going forward. I think we all value the presence of ice in the community. It allows youth hockey, figure skating, recreational purposes, and we subsidize all sorts of activities through our Parks Department and other programs. We subsidize pouts replacement in rural areas. If you live in the city, you're subsidizing the county highway system. And so there are different users that don't always benefit directly from those costs. And I would encourage us to think broadly about what the role of government is in making this a quality place to live. But we did look at the issue, if we make the investment and it's sold, what do we do? And we put a provision in that said that any sale of any equipment would revert back to the general fund for the county. But I think it would be helpful to know, the problem is that we've got a critical need in a short period of time. The ice is likely to fail next fall. They limped along through 1 year. So what do we do in that short term? Maybe we can go back and reevaluate whether all of the money is needed, whether the cooling tower is needed, or whether other things are needed. But we do need to make, do we support having ice available to the community, and at what level of investment from the county? I happen to think that it's a worthwhile investment. It helps with kids. Other things, I have no problem working with others, as we did with the aquatic therapy pool, to try to generate additional support from the community, pay for a portion of the project. But we need to have that discussion and know whether if there's a threshold at which you're comfortable funding that facility.
Supervisor DeBrew, please.
I just want to say also that my kids and my grandkids are very active in hockey. And when you say it, don't bring money in from outside the area, I don't believe that at all, because any parent that was involved in hockey has spent thousands of dollars in other towns going to play hockey at these tournaments, and the hockey is getting to be nearly a year-round sport now, if you have a decent arena and you run it properly. They would spend weekend after weekend, and I'd go with them, and they spend a lot of money in motels, foods, gas, all over. So it brings in a lot of money, like ski or any other event. Not everybody in the area uses it, but it's something, a big plus, I think, for the area. And it involves an awful lot of kids, if you ever figure out how many kids, all the way from 3-4 years old up till my boys are still playing hockey and adult hockey. So I think there's a need for it.
Supervisor Hoppe, please.
I have a few questions that I would just like explanations or answers if possible. Is this the first time we've talked about fixing the rink? I don't remember, and I haven't been around that long. So I'm just wondering, I heard somewhere a while ago that the rink was having issues. But I don't remember it in the board before speaking about this situation. I don't know. My next question is, I believe there was a proposition brought to the county, maybe back in January, about having a new ice arena, having it a public-private, where you'd go out and you would actually get funding from different businesses to support the project, to really build a nice arena here. It just wouldn't be county, and it wouldn't be a load on the taxpayers. I've never heard anything about that. I don't know a lot about it, and I don't know where it's at or if it was ever considered. Don't know. My third thing is, if we built a new ice arena, who would manage it? I mean, it may, if we built a state-of-the-art kind of thing, it may bring in a lot more activity than what we have now. And I know that is booked fairly tight now. But if we brought in teams that were semi-pro or a little bit less, I don't know the rankings, and you'd have to be selling tickets and supporting a larger crowd. Who's going to manage all this? Does the county have to hire people to do that? Or would the Parks Department do that? Or how would all of that operation go? I think those are things that need to be considered, as far as looking at the options and looking at any possibilities that might come upon us. I think I like hockey too. I don't go to games. When my kids were in the band and they played at all the hockey games, I agree. I had a great time. I have wonderful memories. But I just think that putting $940,000 into a Band-Aid is a little bit much, especially if we're looking at, actually building down the road. I think, and then for us to have to make a decision on short notice so that it can be in place by September or October. I don't know that I have enough room in my brain to actually calculate what what the vote would look like on that. That's really a lot to consider. So that's all I have, thanks.
So I'll try to, I think you had 3 questions in there. Jamie can take a lot of them in terms of detail. Short answer, has the rink ever been discussed? I think when I started in administration, it was similar to the highway shop. That the rink was built in the 70s with used equipment. It's never risen to the top during my time of, hey, this is a mandate, because it's not mandated, right? It's a nice thing, I think you've all alluded to, but you have a lot of things you needed to fix. You had leaky library roofs that went unfixed for a long time, which caused a lot of problems. You've had a lot of work here at the courthouse and the jail that required immediate action. So short answer, yes, it's been discussed. The challenge you talked about with the short term, I think that's why I defer to Supervisor Seefeld's staff. We're just tasked with what's the short-term plan to ensure ICE and it's the most flexible without knowing whether you're long-term in the business or not. So I'll defer to all of you as elected officials on what additional information you want to be considered by us to put together revise that plan. In terms of community work around a public-private partnership, one of the first things I had the opportunity to participate in when I was in administration, when I got hired as the deputy, yeah, there's been a number of iterations of, hey, we could have a public-private partnership to build a new arena, a sports complex, an Olympic training facility was discussed. There are a lot of different ways that this service can be provided. Supervisor Foote referenced, there are cities, and I think was made before, there are municipalities that run it directly. There are nonprofits that can have those facilities, and there are counties that can do it. There are school districts that can own those things. And who can manage it? Any one of those. And the answer for Marathon County has been, we've done it for 50 years. That doesn't mean you need to do it tomorrow. But that's the way it's been done. If you want something else, my sense as staff, provide us the direction, we'll bring you the information to move forward, but there are a lot of different ways that can go. Similar to event centers, there are cities and counties that partner together on event centers. There are a lot of different ways for that public-private partnership to work, and you get to, as I said before, if you are going to deliver the service, you get to decide that third level. Well, second level is what level do you want to do it, but the third one is at what cost? To the point before, do you want to subsidize? What is your cost recovery percentage you want us to hit? And then we can set the fees based on that. So I know that's not you had a lot of statements in there about, and I get it, it's a tough decision. Anything you want to add on? I mean, I know we've been talking about fixing the ice arenas for a long time.
Yeah, I touch on that a little bit. We have talked about it for a long time. We have a 50-year-old sheet and we have a 40-year-old sheet. And it was a big discussion during the West Side Master Plan update in 2021 to 2023. So that's where it came forth. I can tell you that from the management of the arena in my time here and even prior to my time, is we do a lot of stuff with we have a very, very talented staff in our Parks Department, and we have tried to do everything with that facility and any other facility that we manage where we don't have to come in front of the board to ask for these repairs. We have, a small project fund that we can make some repairs with. Even this last year when we had the issues of losing hundreds of gallons of brine a day for those couple of days when we really realized we had a leak, my staff worked multiple hours opening up different areas of the rink to try to fix it ourselves. We called in some professionals to talk with us and do it. We were able to cover that all within our budget. There are some major repairs that need to go into that arena that were discussed like during that West Side Master Plan update. But that all led to, in that West Side Master Plan update, all led to the discussion of, the future of the rink, which does need to come before the board, and what does that look like long term. Is it a brand-new two-sheet facility that's year-round? Is it a one-sheet that's year-round? Is it just repair, like you had talked about with the highway department? Is it just to repair what we have and continue business as normal? Or is it to not offer ice anymore? And so the Park Commission has actually been working on those discussions for about a year and a half, because we did get that grant to look at the safe room, which allowed us to also study the ice arena at the same time. We have the majority of that grant finished when it comes to a brand new sheet. We are finishing the second part of it, which looks at rebuilding our one sheet that we have and repairing. All that will eventually come to the board for you to make that decision of those 4 options. No more ice, repair what we've got in business as usual, build one sheet brand new, build 2 sheets brand new. That's still got to come to you. The Park Commission has a preference that they've already talked about. But in the short term, typically we wouldn't be here. We would be limping the ice arenas along until we can bring that bigger discussion to you for that long-term plan. But unfortunately, with the issues we had in October and the fact that we were able to get the rink running and it lasted all season, we had some issues here and there, but nothing major. We kept ice cold for the whole season. We just took our last sheet of ice out on Monday. We now have a situation where we could have the same thing in October where we turn on rink 2 and there's no ice. And then, so what we're trying to do in the short term, because if you're going to do any major repairs to the arena, whether even if it's just fixing what we have and doing business as usual, there's planning, there's funding that has to be fundraised or whatever to go in there. It's at least a 1 to 2 year project for anything like that. So right now, it is a Band-Aid, what we're doing right now. But by doing the MAT system, it's an option that we feel when we brought to the Park Commission and they looked at was cost effective to get us through that 2 years, 4 years, whatever it takes for the county to decide what is that future of those 4 options. And then if we decide to do any of the 3 that's staying in the ice business and we repair what we've got or build new, then the MAT system that we're proposing can be reused elsewhere on a different rink, or it could be sold and get some. And that's what the HR Finance Committee said. If we sell anything that we purchase, it would go back in general fund. The cooling tower isn't really part of the short-term repair. It's just a major piece of equipment that we've also limped along. So when we brought this forward, that if we're going to do this for 2 years with a bigger fix, that's a piece of equipment that really needs to be repaired. But if you would do anything of the top 3 again, that cooling tower could be reused. If we rebuild a brand new arena, that cooling tower would go to the new arena. It's those equipment can be used. Just like a few years ago, you invested in new boards for that arena because the boards around the rink were also 50 plus years old, very unsafe. And the county board chose to make that investment. Those boards can also be reused in a new arena if you were to go that route. So we're trying to do as much with the arena to keep it operational. And if we didn't have to come to the board for ask for any major funds, I definitely would not be here. So we'd like to just make it, we just can't fix it in-house anymore to guarantee that there's ice this fall. And so this is the short term. And then hopefully in the next couple of months, we bring that final study to you to get direction on that long term. And long term, I definitely think the only way we're going to get it done is partners, public, private, whatever that is. It's a large dollar amount. There's no way, I shouldn't even say this because if the county would fund it, that would be great, but I know that's not realistic. I've been through this before. I have experience building an ice arena when I was in Minnesota and going through it. We have experience operating it, so when your question about operation, we can look at all different options, but our department is very capable of managing even a new facility. So that's why this is here is for that short term to get us over a year or 2 to whenever the county board can make that final decision of what. And if it is not to be in the ice arena anymore, business anymore, then we have that time to let those user groups know that they need to make other plans. But that's for this fall to let our user groups know now if we aren't going to have ice, or even in October when we can't get it up and running. For our users that rely on this, that would be very hard and detrimental because it's not just when you think of the school district, that's WIA, that's a whole conference that relies on that rink, and it's not necessarily just your local school. Our youth hockey, we do have rinks in the area, Everest, Mosinee, Merrill, they were all talked about. They're all maxed out on ice time, so our youth wouldn't be able to find time anywhere. But all of those other rinks, like our Wausau Youth Hockey doesn't stay just in our rink. They play at Mosinee, they play at Merrill, they play at Everest. All the youth and all the teams play each other, so everybody uses the rinks all the time. And we do have an NH3L team now. If we were to improve at some point, we could get a higher level team, and that's already been discussed too. So there's options, but that's for a further discussion. It is a fix just to get us to where we can make that longer term decision.
Supervisor Opel, please.
Well, I have to ask, tell Mr. Robinson, I guess we don't have to stand up anymore. So it's easy on my knees. I usually don't rise to speak unless I think I've got something important to say. I'm one of those managers for 28 years down at Marathon Park. I worked in that refrigerator for 28 years. And I heard a comment earlier that really nobody from outside the community comes here, so where's the gain? It's just for local people. Well, over the years, I've seen, and it wasn't ice year-round, it was a multi-purpose building, I've seen auto shows, home shows, boat shows, art in the park, and all kinds of events down there that the Convention and Visitors Bureau would say puts heads in beds, all right? And that's what keeps our hotels going. So it generates revenue for each municipality with the room tax. And we get to, of course, we get to spend it on recreation and stuff. So, and when we get to, I think it's September or so, I was even on the Youth Hockey Board of Directors for a while. I don't know why, but I did. But I think it's February and even maybe through January and into March, there's each level of hockey has a tournament or two. So we bring in, those are usually 8-team tournaments, one which is a local, our team. So there's 7 other teams of all those players and everything coming to our town, spending the weekend, spending money, going to motels, I'm sure, unless they sleep out in their car, but I don't think so in the winter. So, and I'm happy that you said gifted and talented people run that, our managers. All right, thank you, even though you weren't around when I was a manager. But that is what I have to say. I honestly think we need the short-term fix or the temporary fix or whatever it is. I think we need to support it and keep it going. If we're gonna say it's got to generate revenue, well, let's look at Wausau baseball and see if they're really paying their fair share. Let's look at soccer and see if they're paying their fair share. Where does it end? This is a recreation activity for our kids. How many people have had kids in youth hockey here in Marathon County? I have. There's many of us. It's of great value. It was great fun. You met a lot of people. You even got to travel to other cities. So I'm for it. Thank you.
Supervisor Poole, please.
Sure, I have 3 questions for this. First, about
Can you speak up or get closer to the mic, Supervisor Poole?
Is this a little better?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, 3 questions related to this. The first one is the MAT system. The reason we're going with it is the flexibility and the resale value. If we resold the MAT system and the other equipment that we buy with a short-term fix, do we know the value of that? Second question would be, and it follows that if we can sell used equipment, can we also buy used equipment to save money, a used MAT system? Third question, and I think that it's a larger conversation for what we do in the future and getting community partners engaged for that. That's obvious, but for the short-term fix, it makes the most sense to me if we want user group involvement. The cleanest solution would be just to raise fees. Would there be any hindrance to raising fees for next season to these user groups? That's basically all my questions.
Who wants to?
I'll start and Jamie will take the hard ones.
Right.
Matt system, I don't think I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know what we're going to get on resale. We'll get what somebody will pay for it. I think anytime you buy a piece of equipment, I think your second question made me think about when we do the procurement relative to the MAT system, we can draft that in such a way that we can specify what we would need to at least allow for someone to submit a proposal with a used piece of equipment. But I think the cost that Jamie and her team put together is based on new with the consultant that we've had for the study. User fees, I am not tied into. It's been a while since my daughter was in youth hockey, so I don't know how likely I would be to pay the additional fees. She doesn't skate anymore, but Jamie deals with them a lot. I don't know if you want to talk to user fees.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is something that could be looked at. Our fees were set back in when our budget was done for this next year. So typically our user groups all do their, calendar, their fiscal year. Some of them are January to December that set their fees. Some of them are July to June. So some of them may have already set their fees, and that may be a little bit of hindrance to them, but it's something that we could look at, or even for future years. It is something that if we looked at doing major improvements to the facility, that the fees definitely would increase. Our fees right now are a little bit higher than the rest of them in the area, but not by much. We're $155 per hour. Everest fluctuates, but they're about 140, 145, depending upon if you're a local team or an outside team. And so we're just slightly higher, but our user groups have 2 sheets of ice to use, where everybody else just has 1 and they have to share. So I think the fees is something we could look at, maybe not necessarily for this season, because our budgets have been set, possibly for this season, because they don't start till October, but definitely for the next year, we can always look at those fees and where we're at. I do want to point out, when I talk about the budget and the subsidy of the arena, that's a year-round amount that I gave, and that's what I had put together for our feasibility study. So our ice arena is only a seasonal rink. It's not year-round right now. It's only September through March, and that's because it's really a pole building that's not heated or cooled. So that budget for those facilities that I gave you also includes like our summer rentals and stuff. So that's the cost of those buildings, not necessarily just the ice season. I have a really hard time. I try to do this with our consultants of pulling out just the ice season, but the ice is in our general fund. So it's not like our sports complex, which is a separate fund that everything is just for that. Ice is included. So if I buy cleaning supplies for our department and some of them go to the ice arena, I don't have a way of really pulling out exactly what that cost is for the ice arena. So that's rough. But looking at those facilities, it's not necessarily just the ice fees that could raise, but the facility rental fees. So we do have like the dinosaur show that I think is coming in the next couple of weeks or just was here. We have Art in the Park. We've got Sisters of Skate that skates there. It's a roller skating group. We've got all kinds of different rentals of that facility throughout the year. The circus has been there. Those fees also contribute to that bottom line that I had given you. So it's not necessarily just the ice. If we were to go to a year-round facility, we would make that separately so we could track just the ice costs. But I wanted to clarify that as well.
And I think that's one of the things when Jamie alluded to the opportunity to drill down, I'll say, more into our costs. Should the board decide to stay in the ice business long-term and make some substantial repairs, my suggestion would be to move to, and we can talk with Sam about how to do this, I don't know that I'd call it a true enterprise fund, but have some special revenue rules about how do we better track our costs so that then to provide the board with not only information that then you can use, but the information you'd use to provide direction to us as to what cost recovery you want. As was alluded to before, for any recreation program, apart from forestry and camping, you really are subsidizing those things, but it would allow you to say, hey, for this for activity X, we want to recover cost recovery of 60%, but activity Y, that's 80%, and activity Z is 100. That's my goal, is to move us more in that direction, to be able to drill those things down, and I think our financial system, give us a little bit more time, will allow us to do that. But as Jamie said, the way it's always been has been in the general fund, which I understand isn't conducive for that conversation. But should you decide to stay in the long-term ice business, of course, I would suggest to you we move away from that approach.
Just a last comment. I think it would be easier for our user groups to find a way to raise fees next season than it would be for them to find new ice. Thank you.
Supervisor Enders, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to see user group-driven alternative funding structure proposals, including increased fee structures, private sponsorships, and user enterprise revenues generated. My other question for those users regarding funding goes back to ticket sales, merchandise sales, concession sales, personnel administrative costs, and any monies raised through direct sponsorship. And it sounds like fundraising is time sensitive, so I'd say, no time like the present, and that communication needs to go out. I'd also like to say, as an athlete myself, paying my own way wasn't up for a debate. It was mandatory, or else my teammates' season didn't happen. And another question that never gets asked is, where can facilities be consolidated? Because, oftentimes some of the players on these teams are from out of state. And I've heard this before as well, that, from multiple cities in the surrounding area. But, too often I also hear the argument, in order to remain competitive, we need to meet the competitive operational capacity of new construction. So to be clear, let me say, I support these teams, but I also believe it's critical for them to get some skin in the game. So circling back, I'd like to see alternative funding structure proposals as soon as possible, in partnership with commitments from those who will be directly impacted, whether that be through fee increases, private sponsorship funding, raising targets, which need to be met by those user groups. And only then can we discuss public funding commitments.
Supervisor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sports and recreation keeps kids busy, and it's healthy. When I think about strategic investments over the next few years, I lean into a highway shop and not a new ice arena. I don't foresee us visiting this topic of an ice arena for 3 to 5 years, and possibly even kicking the topic down further down the road, much like the highway shop has gone on for so long. A $940,000 investment is a stretch for a booster club or even businesses to put that kind of investment in a county facility that we're expressing uncertainty about as part of this West Side Master Plan. We can't ask them to dole out that kind of money when we say it may not be there in a few years. I agree with the increased user fees discussed to make it self-sustainable. I do think that's important. And I've heard from my own constituents that scheduling is a challenge to get their kids ice time due to the extensive usage. So not repairing this facility and asking area families to travel to Merrill or Mosinee or Everest would only add to the strain in available ice. So with all that, I'm in support of this measure to repair the facility to make it operational. Thank you.
Supervisor Arstead, please.
Thank you, Chair. So when my kids were growing up, they played hockey. And one of the big things was a kid on ice is never in hot water. So I always thought about that with the amount of time that they spent. And there were many times where they had to go in and skate on a school night at 9:30 at night just to get the ice time. Hockey, figure skating is very expensive. I was also a figure skater growing up in the Twin Cities, and it's very expensive. And this opportunity to save this arena for this purpose, I think, is very important. But I think, like everybody else here that has talked, they talked about raising fees. That's a great idea. I think we should also be starting to really seek partners. in this short-term fix. So I'm in favor of it because like I said, a kid on ice is never in hot water. So I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Supervisor Seifelt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Opel kind of took my thunder away here with his speech, and I'm glad he did it. But in our community, far as for hockey, I mean, I have families out in my part of the community that do come in and use with youth hockey, I should say, and it's not that many, but there is people from the outside that do come in and use these. But down the road, the question was asked, this is a Band-Aid, why should we stick the money into this? If we were going to build a new ice arena in 2 years, yes, I would say that. But that's down the road. That's down the road quite a ways. I'm thinking. So to do this, to keep our people in our community happy, because if we do not have ice for the next year, I invite you to come to a park commission meeting and listen to all the complaints. So I support this solely, so I hope everybody else does too. Thank you.
Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say, Jamie, I was just wondering, years and years ago, my wife and I, we were kind of young, a lot younger then, so we'd bring the kids in and go ice skating there at the arena. Can they still do that there? Is there time for that? It sounds like it's really busy.
Yes, we do. It is very busy, but we do think that's very important to still offer public skating times. Every day from 11 to 1, the daytime skate is open. Now, when your kids are in school, we typically get a lot of figure skaters because there's a lot of figure skaters that happen to be homeschooled. But also we get the school groups to come during that time as well. Just walk over from John Muir, or they get bused over. And then families with younger kids come in that time. And then Wednesday evenings are set aside on one rink for public skate, and Sunday afternoons are set aside for public skate as well.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Foote?
I just had a quick question. Do you sell your boards for money to the community? I mean, I've been to a Cyclones game, and I'm trying to think back, and I can't remember. I felt like Budweiser probably supported them, but other than that, I wasn't sure.
So we have contracts right now with the Cyclones for the Rink 1, and we get a portion of the proceeds from the sale of those advertisements. And we have a contract with youth hockey that we get a portion of the sale of what they advertise as well. So yes, we do get a portion of what they advertise. And that is something that in the future too, if we were to do something newer, we would revamp those contracts. Right now in our department, we just don't have someone to be able to sell that sponsorship. So by working with those user groups and then getting a portion of that. Same with the concession stand, we get a cut of their gross sales. So that comes back as revenue to our department as well.
So your parent groups and whomever is with the Cyclones groups, they're taking care of the kids groups, the ticket sales, the concession stand and all that, and then you're splitting it or however you're dividing that up.
Yep.
So I was just wondering if there was a way to contact some of the large donors in the area, to help give this thing a kick in the pants, because we've got this $1 million that we're somehow finding. I don't know how. But that's not going to be enough, ultimately, for you to have a nice enough arena to go all the time. I think that if we knew that other people were going to step in and there was going to be some kind of a backing from the community, like, hey, we've got this big donor here, we've got another big donor, they're going to have their name in gold up on the boards, or, it might be easier pill to swallow at this time. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and if the direction from the county board is for the long term to move forward with any types of repairs, even if it's repairing what we have and doing business as usual or improving, definitely, like I said earlier, the cost to those is higher than the county has, or probably will provide. So that's been the discussion. We have not gone out and asked for any grant funding or donations or anything at this time for this fix to get us to that decision. But as soon as the county board decided or gave us direction that we were going to stay in the ice business and we were going to do something to make the 50-year-old facilities last another 50 years, that would definitely be something we do. And our user groups are all, we've been working with, and we work with them closely even on the feasibility study, and they're all supportive of that. Just nobody's put any boots to the ground on that because we don't want to go out and raise money if the county board's going to give the direction that now or in 2 years, we're not going to have ice anymore, then, we don't want to ask for that donation. So as soon as we have that further direction, that would definitely be something we do.
The one thing, and I'll explain, when this item came up to HR Finance, one of the things that I expressed was a little bit of a concern that a lot of times we talk about, how do we recover cost and capital costs on projects? And I and the administrators had several conversations multiple times about, government doesn't do a very good job of truly cost analyzing its overall cost in providing services. And so one of the things that we've often talked about is where do we, when we recover costs, there's direct operational costs, there's direct operational costs that subsidize certain entities. And so when I brought this up and I voted to move it to the full board for discussion, I wanted to have a discussion about, are we ever going to get to a point where we set aside dollars in operational costs to pay for capital? And I think one of the things that stuck to me is never leave an emergency on, to be not explored. And I don't know that there's a better time to explore, at least the opportunity to look at fees, look at costs, and analyze where is the appropriate funding level for, I understand that we're potentially higher than other facilities. At the same token, those other facilities had some significant capital raised from outside of county taxpayer dollars. And they now have support for operations, but I don't know that they are setting aside any funding for capital reserve at some future point. And we're at a point now where the facility that's 50 years old, that we didn't set aside any funding out of any of the user fees that we've had over the 50 years to replace and or repair this facility. So let's have those discussions. And so I would like to have that discussion before we see, because I think appropriately we're at two different inflection points. One is an emergency fix for possibly up to 5 years of use, and then a different discussion about, do we stay in the business long term? And if so, what does that plan look like? So that's just my thoughts. Supervisor Rosenberg, please.
I don't follow hockey. I don't care about hockey. I never played hockey. I ran for the DC Everest School Board and got elected when Greenheck was going in with their ice sheet, and 3 more terms. I was wrong to be opposed to Greenheck, and I'll be supporting having ice in Marathon County going forward. I think it's important.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if some money can be raised and effort can be put forward, I would support it. But as it stands, I won't support it. But if there's some money raised, the more I listen to it, it sounds like there's a need for it. But I feel like they still should have some stake in the, raising money, donations, and that, and going out and getting support. That's all I have. Thank you.
Supervisor Foote, please. I believe this is your third time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Chair Gibbs, I just want to say I agree wholeheartedly with you. I would love to plan ahead for things to fail, because they do. And I am on the board at the North Central Healthcare, and they are planning ahead for when the pool might need more than just average maintenance, you know? How many years is it supposed to last? They're just thinking, like, it's just something you have to think about, and I would hope that, like, this is something that we can now say, hey, let's, if we get this Band-Aid, let's know when it's coming off, and then what's our plan for further. That's all.
Supervisor Seibert, please.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. This is to address what you were saying about getting money put aside. I think we need to look at the Highway Department. The Highway Department saved $30 million. I don't know how many years it took. So why can't we look at how they did that and implement that in the more departments? Maybe the user fee in that ice rink should include a 10% that gets squirreled away. You know, something like that. Thank you.
Other discussion? All right, I think we'll have some additional information on Tuesday. Moving on to, from the Infrastructure Committee, item 9C 5A, a 2025 Work Zone Awareness Week Resolution, Resolution 18-25. Any discussion? Okay, item 9C6 from the Public Safety Committee. Item 9C6A, a consideration of a letter of support for attic services for housing help program funding applications. Resolution 19-25. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 9C6B, a consideration of drafting a letter of support to the state of Wisconsin for funding support for medical clearance program at North Central Health Care. Resolution 20-25. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, we're down to announcements and/or requests. We'll make an announcement that next Tuesday at 7:30 at the Grand Theater will be a showing of a documentary called Americans Without Addresses. That is a documentary about people, the homeless in this country, and it is free. There is no charge. It is offered, but there is you can go on to a website at the Grand Theater and reserve a ticket. It's being put on by the Bridge Street Mission Community Partners Campus and the Wausau Police Department. So again, I encourage everybody to at least review that documentary, because it does go through in-depth Americans with no addresses. Any other announcements and/or requests? All right, we are down to item number 11. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Seepfeld and seconded by Supervisor Marash to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.